Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of the Rotoworld Fantasy Basketball Q&A. I'm Raphielle Johnson, joined as always by Noah Rubin. Noah, both of our teams had really good Monday nights. Trae Young did Trae Young things late, and then Jalen Brunson did the same for the Knicks. Before we even worry about Monday's games, what were you doing when you first found out that Luka Donic was being traded to the Los Angeles Lakers?
Well, thankfully I was asleep because I think if I had still been awake when that trade happened, I would have been up another couple hours. But I was already asleep, so I was able to wake up to it, which was, I was explaining it to my friends. It felt like a cup of coffee, like just reading that. Like I was awake like that. Like normally it takes me a few minutes to kind of wake up, but then I'm like scrolling through a bunch of texts saying, I can't believe this happened. Like, please tell me you're awake. I'm like, okay, like what's up? And then I saw the name Luka thrown out. I was like, hold on, wait a minute. There's no way that Luka just. But then it was real, which was insane.
Yeah, I was working. It felt like it was going to be a straightforward night because the last game was Phoenix getting blown out by Portland. It's like, all right, easy night. And then Shams drops a tweet. It's like, no, he had to have been hacked. Like, obviously, social media being what it is now, you're like, that can't be real. And then he came back with the follow-up tweet. Yes, this is real. And it had the full trade breakdown. But I'm absolutely stunned. You give up a 25-year-old who still hasn't reached his prime, I would argue. Nico Harrison said it's a 3 to 4 year window that, well, you better hope you're right, that you get this right, and the combo of Anthony and Kyrie brings you a championship. And I don't even know if that's going to be enough for some Mavericks fans after a deal like this. But
yeah, I think some of the reports coming out, like obviously there's going to be a million questions for him and everybody involved in the trade coming out of it. The one that I read just a little bit before we got on, let me pull this up, see who it was from. It was, this is, I guess, DLLS Mavs, like their account had an article and someone pulled the quote out of it, that there has been belief which multiple team and league sources expressed to me over the past months, long before this trade, that Harrison does not have a long-term desire to remain in his current role as general manager. Which to me, it's like, okay, that seems kind of important. Like, if he literally isn't planning to be in his current role as head of the team's like roster and staffing, and he trades away the 25-year-old superstar that's going to be around for a long time, like that seems kind of interesting to me. Even then, Luka is still widely considered a better player than Anthony Davis. I understand like the defensive angle that he's taking, and that's going to be a very, very good defensive team. But considering this team was just in the NBA Finals, like it's difficult to wrap my head around or to justify, even if a couple of the points I can understand it. Overall, it's like still just mind-boggling.
Yeah, we'll see. I have my questions defensively on the perimeter about this team because it looks like you're asking PJ Washington to guard 3s instead of 4s and Klay Thompson 2s instead of 3s. And Kyrie's going to have to deal with 1s. And we know the point guards out west. That's not an easy task. So,
yeah, who's guarding Luka on that team?
Najee Marshall, but
I like Najee Marshall. I like Washington.
I like those guys, but that's
right.
Yeah. All right, we've talked enough about that. I'm sure it'll come up a lot more in this next hour. Let's get into some questions, starting with frequent viewer Ryan. Ryan, thanks for joining us again. He has Anthony Davis, 2-game playoff week and his championship week. Would you accept this trade? Tatum and Booker for AD and Zach LaVine. And this is an ESPN league, if I'm not mistaken. So, Noah, what are your thoughts on this trade proposal?
I kind of like the logic behind it. I think the fact that it is a 2-game week in the championship is kind of it was something we even talked about preseason with teams like Dallas. And if I want to say it was Charlotte, it was the other team that had a 2-game week. I don't remember exactly during that, whatever week it ends up being. But it was like something we talked about preseason. So like the fact that obviously it changes now in the middle of the season, like not something you really expect. So getting a pretty comparable. Like Tatum's probably a tier down from AD, but to be able to make up the ground of Zach LaVine to Devin Booker, I think that this is probably a trade that I would accept. I think that Tatum and Booker both have very safe, secure roles that we know exactly what that's going to look like. Whereas AD and Zach LaVine are both playing for new teams. I'm assuming Zach LaVine's probably going to have the ball even less now with Sabonis, Malik Monk, and DeMar DeRozan on his team. So no, I don't hate this deal at all. I think it actually is probably something I would do.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. The big thing is the LaVine part for me. He's going to a team where you have three guys who will have pretty high usages as well. So I'm not saying he's going to turn into a catch and shoot guy just because he's in Sacramento, but he's going to take a hit there. And the AD scheduling, if you were playing 3 games, I could see holding on to him. But 2 in a championship week, that's not good. So I think I would probably make this trade as well. All right. Now the next question about the Quentin Grimes, Caleb Martin trade. Are either one of these guys worth picking up? 12-team 9-cat head-to-head. And do we think Grimes starts?
I think, this trade obviously happened less than an hour ago, but the trade was Quentin Grimes and a 2025 second for Caleb Martin. I thought it was pretty interesting that Dallas had to attach a pick to get Caleb Martin while also giving up a really solid player in Quentin Grimes, who's had some really good games for him this year. I think Martin, I don't want to say like his skill set is redundant to what they already have, but like PJ Washington and Najee Marshall are both like good defensive 3/4s. Like they're kind of like that tweener forward. So it is a skill set that they kind of already have a few guys that play pretty similarly, but I still think Martin will play a role. It's just going to be hard to say whether he's going to play 15 or 25 minutes per game or somewhere in between, especially with Anthony Davis wanting to spend at least start at the 4, and we'll see how much time he wants to spend at the 4. So Martin will have a role. I don't know if it'll be enough to make him a standard league guy. Grimes, I think I would probably start. I was looking at Philly's roster after the trade, and when they're fully healthy, the starting lineup to me should be Maxey, Grimes, Paul George, Kelly Oubre, Joel Embiid with Yabusele off the bench. So, yeah, I think Grimes could definitely play 25 to 30 minutes per game. I don't think that he, one, that's not necessarily a guarantee. And 2, he'll be a nice floor spacer for them, should get a couple other stats here and there. I don't think he's like a must add in 12-team league, but I think he's worth keeping an eye on especially right now with all the injuries they have. Like they've been starting Eric Gordon. So, and like now he's even hurt. So it's like Ricky Council IV and Justin Edwards starting. It's like, I don't see a reason why Quentin Grimes wouldn't start immediately and then could start after they get fully healthy.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. The question is, what stats is he going to get you outside of 3-pointers once they're whole? Because he's not going to have the ball in his hands very much. He's not that kind of player, to be fair, but between Maxey, George, and Embiid, there aren't going to be a whole lot of opportunities to score for a 4th or 5th option. And defense, he's never struck me as a type who's going to get you those defensive stats either. So, I think Caleb Martin, he kind of helps address the wing defender issue that Dallas is going to have with that lineup, because I don't know if PJ can guard threes. We'll see, but I don't think that's something you want to have him do for 30-plus minutes a night. So Martin should help there. But, yeah, I think Grimes is more of like a watch list / 14-team ad, while Caleb, I would probably take more of a wait-and-see approach regardless of league size with him. All right. Just get this out of the way. You don't have any inside info on Colin Sexton's injury. What I will say is that I kind of feel like stuff like this makes it easier to kind of target some of the younger Jazz players, because those guys are going to play quite a bit after the All-Star break, I think. Like a Bryce Sensabaugh. We've already talked about Isaiah Collier on this show before, but there's like him, Kyle Filipowski, another one. Those guys are going to play plenty down the stretch as the Jazz try to figure out who can kind of go along for the ride with this rebuild, so to speak. So that's all I can say there. Don't have any info on the severity of Sexton's injury, to be honest with you, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, until they release an injury report for their game tomorrow, we won't know anything. So
yeah. Okay. Does the Grimes-Martin swap impact Edwards and/or Council's minutes in Philly going forward? Is either worth a speculative add?
I think that they had some streaming value as like they've been, or they both started the last game. Council or Edwards had been starting a few games before that, but I think those are more results of the other injuries, like Paul George being out, Eric Gordon being out. Obviously, Embiid being out has kind of impacted the entire rotation. Some of those guys may be back tonight, so that could have more of an impact on their minutes and usage. Like if Embiid's back, then obviously they're seeing significantly fewer shots. And I do think that Grimes is ahead of them in the pecking order when he's, with the team. I mean, it'll probably be no way he plays tonight, obviously. And probably actually they do play Dallas tonight. That would be, I mean, it won't happen because the trade has to process, but it'd be pretty funny if they traded them and like literally just say like, yeah, like we're already here. Like just go get the other jersey.
Yeah.
At least 1 or 2 more games before Grimes suits up for them. But yeah, I'd imagine he's ahead of them in the rotation, which would probably limit. I mean, it's already been pretty limited fantasy upside for them. But now it's just harder to justify.
Yeah. If you didn't add them before this, I don't see the point in adding them now. Maybe you get a game or 2 without Grimes because he has to get acclimated, but I don't really know if that's worth it for Justin Edwards or Ricky Council the fourth. Okay. Is Montas Buzelis silly season stock going up rapidly based on trades? Yeah. I think, no Zach LaVine for one. Obviously, I think everyone on the perimeter is going to benefit in terms of the usage and whatnot, but Buzelis is someone they definitely need to see more of down the stretch here. And it makes no sense to make a move like this and not give the young guys more minutes down the stretch here. So I think his stock is going up.
Yeah, I think this is finally that trade was finally a little bit of evidence that Chicago may not just try and make a push for the play-in this year.
Yeah.
And they might actually finally do the right thing and start at, they got their first round pick back, which I think was pretty important and really helps open the door for them to actually fully embrace a rebuild this year, which I think was, I mean, like it's important. There's no reason to fully tank if you can't use your own first, but I'm assuming they're going to make more moves at the deadline. Like Vucevic seems like, if they're not going to trade him now, then, it's just malpractice at that point because he's having a like career year long after they probably should have traded him. So definitely can get value there. Other guards like Lonzo Ball is definitely a guy they could move. But there's other guys that could be traded as well. So if they do what they probably should do, then yeah, Buzelis is going to play 35 plus minutes down the stretch, or at least 30. And it'll be an experience. Like I think there'll be some really good games, some really bad games, plenty of inefficiency there. But yeah, I think Buzelis definitely got a stash.
All right. Dovek 19 asks, currently stashing all of Valanciunas, Nurkic, and Jalen Smith before the deadline. Would you hold them or drop one for Lonzo or Zaire Williams? I guess my question is Yusuf Nurkic. Why are we stashing him? I don't see why he would be a stash. Maybe he gets moved, but I think at this point the book is known on him in terms of what he brings to the table. And I don't think he's going to be worth holding on to, even if he gets traded at the deadline personally.
Yeah, I think, and also unless Valanciunas gets moved at the deadline, which I don't know how much of a market there is for him. I mean, the Lakers, I think it was today during his interview or press conference, I guess, Rob Pelinka was talking about, the Lakers do want to add a center, and they were some of the traits he was describing don't exactly line up with Valanciunas and Nurkic. So it's not like they're going to be moved there. I don't really see a situation where either of those guys gets traded into playing 30 minutes per game. I don't know if either of them is worth stashing. So maybe dropping both to pick up Lonzo or Zaire, because I don't know exactly where Lonzo ends up. But Zaire Williams should play a ton for Brooklyn down the stretch.
Yeah.
And then Jalen Smith is, should be the starting center if Vucevic gets traded, though them acquiring Zach Collins in the De'Aaron Fox trade, we've seen what he can do during silly season when he gets a lot of minutes. So I don't even know if Jalen Smith is like a safe stash at this point.
Yeah, I think good point on Valanciunas. He's probably going to end up in a situation where he's playing like 20, 23 minutes per game, if he goes to a contending team. So, yeah, he'll likely take a hit. He's been good in Washington, but he'll likely take a hit to his value if he gets moved at the deadline. And after that, if he doesn't get moved, that's your concern there because I don't know, like how much is he really going to play once Alex Sarr is healthy over there?
Mm-hmm.
Brian, good afternoon. 12-team 9-cat head-to-head can only pick 2 out of Aaron Gordon, Stephon Castle, Zaire Williams, and Dorian Finney-Smith. Who are you keeping the rest of the season?
I'm going to go ahead and eliminate Dorian Finney-Smith. I think he's pretty much like if I'm ranking those guys, he's definitely 4. I think I would keep Aaron Gordon and Zaire Williams. I think that Stephon Castle's had a really good stretch, but the addition of De'Aaron Fox changes things a lot. I wouldn't be shocked if he moved back to the bench, continues to start, but like he's going to see have the ball a lot less assists, less shots, less points, because he's not going to be sharing the floor with Fox and Devin Vassell and Victor Wembanyama, who are probably ahead of him on the pecking order.
Yeah.
So I just don't know if he's able to do enough down the stretch of this season to be worth rostering. Whereas Zaire Williams, like I just said the question before, is going to be playing a lot for the Nets down the stretch and just have some of that silly season value.
Yeah, I agree with that. No argument here. Gordon's going to be a starter once he gets back. And Zaire, like you said, he's going to play plenty. Castle took a hit with that trade, obviously. And then Finney-Smith, I think he has more value to the Lakers than he does fantasy basketball at this point. All right. Has Nico Harrison made himself unfireable for the near future? Feels like he can't pull the plug anytime soon once you let him trade Luka. I think that's a good point, but on the flip side, if things go left, he'll be the easiest scapegoat in the history of sports. Like, it would not take them very long to fire him if, say, like the Lakers make a run deep into the playoffs and Dallas gets knocked out early. You made this trade with the short term in mind, and then you would have actual evidence that the short term isn't as good as he said it would be. So I don't think he's made himself unfireable. If anything, he's put himself on the line even more with this trade.
I think that he definitely has security through the end of the season. I don't think any words on social media or from players or coaches or GMs or anything is going to get him fired right now, even though it seems like a very fireable move. But at the end of the season, like you just said, like Dallas is currently 8th. The Lakers are 5th.
Yeah.
Like, it's only a few games difference, but if the Lakers keep, stay where they are and are able to make it to, the second round, then and Dallas doesn't even make it out of the play-in just based on the current standings, because it's not going to get easier. They're a half game ahead of the Kings, Suns, and Warriors, 3 games ahead of the Spurs, who just got Fox. So, like, it's going to be a battle in the West, just as it always is, to even make it to the playoffs. So, yeah, I would assume, like, they have to be better than the Lakers. And that's probably going to be, hey, if like you just said, Raph, like if they lose early, Lakers make a run, it's going to be hard to justify keeping him.
Yeah. Daniel Titus. I think that's a different Daniel Titus, but either way, thanks for tuning in. 12-team 9-cat is Jakob Poeltl and Bobby Portis enough for Pascal Siakam in a trade?
I think I'd rather have Siakam. I think the lack of, maybe this is just my speculation, but that I think Poeltl could easily be moved at the deadline. Is probably the most movable player or one of the most. I guess Bruce Brown's probably the most movable player for Toronto at the deadline. and just not knowing necessarily where he's going to end up. I'd rather have the guy that has been having an excellent season, just made an all-star game, and had the open streaming spot by having one less player.
Yeah. Yeah, if I have Siakam, I'm not making this trade. If I had Pirtle and Portis, I would definitely try to make it, but yeah, no. Right, Clark Ken asks, are Klingon T. Jones? I'm going to assume you mean Tyus Jones, Yves Missi, and Jeremy Sohan worth holding on to.
I don't think any of those guys are must-drop players. Klingon is obviously more of a stash.
Yeah.
Which, after Portland has now won 8 of their last 9 games, now they're 4.5 games out of the play-in tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are they even going to fully pull the plug again? I don't know. They probably should, but maybe they won't. That they're playing well. So I don't know if he is going to get that, silly season run that we're all expecting him to.
Yeah.
I think Tyus Jones is still a rosterable guy. Yves Missi should have a silly season run, and then Sohan, I don't know. He hasn't been great. Maybe if there was a player that was of these guys, Sohan's probably the most droppable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm holding on to Klingon and Missi. Like, New Orleans hasn't made it clear what they're going to do rest of the season, but I think we kind of know that team's not going anywhere, and it would be malpractice for Missi to not play heavy minutes after the All-Star break. So I think he'll play plenty. We'll see what happens with Portland. That's a situation where they kind of need to make a trade. Either DeAndre Ayton's probably not going to go anywhere because of his contract, but Robert Williams definitely has interest. Maybe he's someone who could fit what the Lakers are looking for in terms of a center right now. So I think Klingon and Missi are the guys that I would hold on to and remain patient with. Tyus Jones as well. He's still starting, playing good minutes. So there is some concern, but I wouldn't rush to drop him at this point. I think Sohan's the one that, like Noah said, because of the change with that De'Aaron Fox trade, he's the one who's probably going to take a hit, even if he were to return to the starting lineup eventually. But, yeah. Okay, and we have a commissioner question from Paul. One team wants to trade away Lauri Markkanen for the other team's Julius Randle. Do I approve this trade? I think this isn't a fair trade since Lowry's rest of season production is up in the air.
I don't think that's – I'm very anti-veto unless there's obvious collusion. I'd rather have Lauri Markkanen, but the rest of season production is very fair because Utah is probably going to pull the plug. So if they don't trade him, then who knows how much he's even going to play over the final 2 months like we've seen the past couple of years. So I don't have any issues with it. If the two managers want to do it, I say go for it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like, it's my feeling, if you're in the league amongst friends, if you feel like you have to have like vetoes and stuff to keep people from cheating, probably shouldn't have a league with those people. So I think you have to let them do it for that reason. In terms of value, we can't say for sure that he's going to get shut down, even though we kind of feel like he will. You can't say that for sure. So if the manager wants to do it, I think you kind of just have to let him do it, because surface level, this isn't exactly an unfair trade. Like, I'd rather have Lowry, but it's not like the person who's giving him up, if all things were equal, is getting fleeced here. I don't think so. Okay. Daniel asks, what are your thoughts on deadline stashing? Is it worth it when Nico is scorching the earth and so much in flux?
I mean, I think honestly, I was working on a column right before we got on this about potential like stashes and how it can impact dynasty value. And it was difficult to go through and try and like predict who could get moved and who that opens up a bunch of minutes for. Like, there's only a few guys I felt pretty good about so far. So generally, I think deadline stashing it's a risk, but I think a lot of things in fantasy basketball are just like what do you feel comfortable doing? What do you feel confident in? See if your risks pay off. So like, there are a few guys where it feels like they will pretty much like definitely see an increased role down the stretch of the season. I think Buzelis is a really good example of that. But even then, like, it is a risk. Like, what if Chicago just doesn't make as many trades as we're thinking they will, or they bring back other young guys and then they're all competing for minutes and Buzelis is stuck playing 20 to 25 minutes? Then it's like, okay, look, that one didn't pay off. So I think it can be worth it, but I don't think it's ever a guaranteed that a stash is going to pay off.
Yeah. I think it depends on where your team is. Like, if you're in a comfortable position in your league where you know you're going to be in the playoffs and have a pretty good seed, then yeah, you may be able to dedicate a spot or two towards stashing someone for after the deadline. But if not, I don't think you can afford to do that because, obviously the primary objective is to get into the playoffs and then go from there. So if anything, I'm just it depends on where your team is. If you're in a good spot, then you can go ahead and do it. You can afford to do it. Go ahead. But if not, I don't think it's something that you absolutely have to do ahead of the trade deadline. Okay. And this question is for Noah. Are defensive stats being overvalued in Dynasty? I've been trying to trade for tier 2/3 centers in Dynasty, and seeing Hart ranked as a top 50 Dynasty guy blew my mind.
I don't think I agree with Isaiah Hartenstein being a top 50 Dynasty guy. I haven't done rankings in a while, but I would assume that he's closer to the top 100 realm. He also just signed this big contract to play with the Thunder, and Chet Holmgren is going to be healthier more often than he has been this season, just generally speaking. So he won't be starting. He'll be playing 20, 25 minutes per game off the bench. So yeah, I don't agree with Hartenstein being a top 50 Dynasty asset. So I'm sorry that you're having to trade with people that think like that, because that obviously makes things pretty difficult. But I could see defensive stats being overvalued a little bit, just because there are a lot of players that I think have, the ability to score or get a bunch of rebounds, but to truly dominant defensive guys, like, there's only a handful of those, and sometimes it's fluky and they aren't like a Dyson Daniels. Like, you feel very good about, like, he's going to be getting a bunch of steals if he's on the court. That's just who he is. But there's some other guys where it doesn't feel like it's guaranteed. So maybe that's why that there's a little bit of extra value placed on defensive stats. But I think the bottom line is Hartenstein top 50. I just don't think it's correct.
Who has the better rest of season value, Ayo Dosunmu or Max Strus?
I say Ayo, just because Strus, I think he's still been part of the starting lineup recently, but even if he stays there, like, I still like Ayo's upside more in Chicago, especially if they trade away some of these guys at the deadline.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd rather have Ayo. He's someone I think is probably going to be shutdown proof if Chicago moves a few guys. While Max Strus, regardless of what happens in Cleveland, he's the fifth option as a starter. So that makes it difficult. I think I would rather have Ayo Dosunmu as well in terms of rest of season value. Okay. I'm stashing Jalen Smith and have Nembhard, McDaniels, Ware, Dosunmu, and Richards at the end of my roster. When AD and Cam Thomas come back, who should I drop?
If/when Cam Thomas comes back, I think is kind of the main thing, because I don't know how close. Like, I think he was at least through the All-Star break. I know there's a couple Nets updates right there, so it's at least through the All-Star break. So you'll have a little bit more time, I guess, till at least after the trade deadline to figure that out. Whereas an AD, he's at least out for tonight. I don't know how much longer he's out after that. So hopefully at least through the deadline, so you can figure out whether stashing Jalen Smith was worth it before. Because if it wasn't, then I would have no issues dropping him. As far as, I guess, the next one, I would probably say Nick Richards. I would say definitely no to Nembhard, McDaniels, and Khalil Ware. I think it comes down to Ayo or Richards, and I feel better about Ayo right now. But again, hopefully they miss at least another game or two so you can get past the deadline and maybe see a game before you have to make that decision.
Yeah, I dropped Nick Richards. You have a healthy Anthony Davis. I don't really feel like you need him in addition to Khalil Ware. And then if you're stashing Jalen Smith too, if you get a Vucevic trade, to kind of boost his value. So Yeah, I think Richards would be the guy that I drop out of the players listed here. Any update on Brandon Ingram?
I saw a video shooting the basketball pregame. That was like the first time he was at shoot around. I think ahead of their last game, him and Herb Jones were both there shooting. But I think the next time we get an actual update, it's going to be because he's been traded.
Yeah.
Or either that or he's just going to probably sit on the sidelines for the rest of the season.
It's a good way to put it. I guess you can kind of keep him in an IL plus spot just in case something changes. But other than that, I don't really know what he's going to provide value-wise for the rest of the season here, unfortunately. Okay. Is this Risacher's ceiling, or is there a room to grow? In him or Tobias Harris, rest of the season in 9-cat?
As far as his ceiling, okay, there's definitely room to grow. He hasn't turned 20 yet.
Yeah.
We're talking about just this season. I think that this is like the last few games is probably his ceiling for this season. But obviously nowhere close to his ceiling as a player. But it's been a very hot shooting stretch for him. Like he's shot over 50% in 3 straight games, 0 turnovers during the last 3 games. I'm not super confident that all of a sudden this is just who he is now, and that he's just going to continue to shoot the ball this well, not turn it over at all, and be a great, option for the Hawks the rest of the season. I don't think he'll be that consistent. So I feel like Tobias Harris is probably the safer option. But with Jalen Johnson done for the season, barring the Hawks making a trade at the deadline, which, I mean, there's rumors for basically every team right now. I think Risacher's role is going to be pretty safe. So it's just hard to bank on, yes, he's just going to continue to hit shots the way he has the last few games, because the first, 3 months of his rookie season are evidence that that's just not what he is yet.
Yeah, he certainly has room to grow for the reasons that Noah stated. As for the rest of the season, I'd rather have Tobias Harris. Tobias is a boring fantasy player, but you know what you're going to get from him. So I think I'd rather have that than Risacher, who can be a bit of a roller coaster, as a lot of rookies tend to be. So I'll take Tobias Harris over him for the rest of the season. Okay. Are we sure the Sixers keep Quentin Grimes rather than sell him for additional picks? I mean, anything's possible, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could happen. I don't really think that that's the angle that they were taking here. I think that they're probably just thrilled to have gotten a younger player that has shown plenty of flashes this year and a pick for Caleb Martin. So,
yeah, you look at that wing rotation too. I think they're going to hold on to him. It's not like they're that far out of a play-in spot in the East. So when you have Maxey, George, and Embiid, there's going to be a level of confidence there that if we can get all 3 of those guys healthy, we can make a run. Whether or not that's realistic, I mean, that's up for Philly to decide. But I think Quentin's going to stay there. And I think, as we discussed earlier, he's going to have an important role up there for the rest of the season.
I'm just thinking about this now, and this is probably more along the lines of conspiracy theory than anything, but I can't imagine that Adam Silver is going to be thrilled if the Sixers end up making a run, because there's already a lot of people, like more casual fans, but just general consensus around the NBA is that the regular season just doesn't matter anymore. That's why they introduced the in-season tournament. So if this team, who I don't think the Sixers are doing it on purpose, Embiid's just had a ton of injuries, Paul George has had a ton of injuries, this team that just was horrible for the first few months, and then all of a sudden just gets their players back and sneaks into the play-in tournament, makes a run. It's just okay, why does the regular season matter at all? We played 82 games, all of our a bunch of guys got hurt, and now it's just who's healthiest in April, and all of a sudden this team can make a run. Why do we care about the regular season? So I can't imagine that Adam Silver will be happy about that if that ends up happening, but they probably will make the play-in, because the only team ahead of them right now is Chicago, and we're expecting them to kind of pull the plug.
players worth adding or stashing with the trade deadline and silly season approaching. I think, as we discussed, last week and earlier in the show, I think it's more about looking at the standings, see who's down, and kind of cherry picking those rosters. Like Utah, for example, and Isaiah Collier, if he's available, you certainly want to get ahead of that. You may get some value before the deadline as well from him. So as we've seen recently with the assists and the defensive ability. So a guy like him would certainly be at the top of my list in terms of someone that you're going to want to add now to have for the silly season. Guys in Brooklyn, like Zaire Williams, like Keon Johnson hasn't been the most efficient player, but we know he's going to play a lot down the stretch. So that's kind of what my approach is to looking for guys to potentially stash, is just see who already stinks and then grab a player or two from them, basically.
Yeah, and I feel like I keep coming back to Chicago, but they just got Trey Jones, Zach Collins, Kevin Huerter, and there'd already been a bunch of reports that they were looking at moving basically everybody on the roster. Yeah. So we could definitely see a scenario where, they move a couple more pieces and Trey Jones and Zach Collins are playing significant roles down the stretch for Chicago. Like if they trade Vooch, I'd rather start Zach Collins than Jalen Smith. We'll see what they end up doing, but that could be another like really good silly season guy.
All right. Esteban asks, what should I do with Stephen Curry? Wait.
Start him.
Yeah, it's Stephen Curry. I kind of feel like he's at the point where there's no need to really panic. I know he hasn't been great. Shot 2 for 12 from 3 last night, but I think you just hold off here. And we'll see what the Warriors do, if anything, before the trade deadline. So I don't think you're certainly not going to look to trade him, and you certainly aren't going to drop him. So just hold on and hope he turns it around. I think if anybody's capable of doing that, Stephen Curry's certainly on that list.
Yeah, they've played a few, like when Steph's played the last handful of games, some pretty good defensive teams. Mm-hmm. So like that obviously makes things a little bit harder on Steph, especially with the way the team is constructed, which is why the Warriors have reportedly been on the phone with basically every team in the league, just begging for an all-star caliber player because they want to pair Steph with somebody else to try and win another ring. So if that ends up happening at the deadline, it's not going to take away shots from Steph because he's Steph. Yeah. And it's just going to make things easier on him. Like, I know KD's name has been thrown around a handful of times. I have no idea if that actually happens. But if they were to get a guy like KD and teams have to now worry about him, then, yeah, Steph's going to see his value increase.
Yeah. Okay. Would you drop DeAndre Hunter for Andrew Nembhard 9-cat?
I think in 9-cat you kind of have to.
Yeah.
Because DeAndre Hunter, I mean, that's what he did last night. 20 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, 0 steals, 0 blocks. Like, I think I looked it up. It was like the 53rd time that a player had scored at least 20 points without recording any rebounds, assists, steals, blocks in NBA history. But that's generally he'll get you a couple of rebounds, but he's not getting you a ton of defensive stats, and he's definitely not getting you assists. Whereas Nembhard is like way more well-rounded.
Yeah, you almost deserve fantasy points when a guy goes for like 20 points and does nothing else. But yeah, I would much rather have Nembhard as well at this point. Okay. Will Fox help Vassell to get back on track, or should I trade Vassell away?
I would think that it helps get him some easier looks. I think there was a quote from him where they were asking him about the Fox trade, and he said, yeah, it should get me some more open shots, but it's just on me to knock him down. So I would assume kind of knocking him down the pecking order a little bit and having him play with a all-star caliber point guard this age. Like obviously Chris Paul's one of the best point guards in NBA history, but he's a little bit past his prime. Yeah. So having Fox mixed in there should just make things a little easier.
Yeah, I think even though Fox is obviously going to be faster at this stage in his career than Chris Paul, there wasn't a huge difference in pace when you compare San Antonio to Sacramento. Like San Antonio's 15th in pace, Sacramento's 11th. So I think you're talking about 0.2 of a point in terms of the difference in number of possessions per game between those two. So there wasn't a huge difference there, but I think within the half court, what Fox can do off the bounce may help a guy like Vassell get cleaner looks at the basket. I think I would take a wait and see approach. I would not look to trade him right away. I think get a couple games in, maybe go to the All-Star break and see what happens there in terms of what you may potentially want to do. Because if anything, if he plays well, you may be able to drive up the price and get a little bit better return than you would have if you just rush to trade him right now. Okay. We're holding Risacher or Zaire Williams or trading them the rest of the season.
I mean, I would say that if you're able to make a good trade, that's probably like the go-to there.
Yeah.
But both those guys should have pretty significant roles down the stretch. We've talked about both already, as far as like what our expectations are for them.
Yep.
So I think at least like holding them is fine, but obviously it's just going to depend. Like, is there someone that makes more sense on the waiver wire?
Yeah, I think I'd look to trade either one first. Yeah, instead of just looking to drop. Last question from James. He's stashing Bilal Coulibaly, Risacher, Chris Middleton, Scoot Henderson, and Yabusele. I guess he's saying who should he hold on to and who should I drop if there's any player worth picking up after the trade deadline.
Is Middleton the drop?
I think he is. He could get to a point where he's playing starters minutes, but I don't know when that's going to be. And it may be past the point of like fantasy playoffs when that happens, So, and plus, his name's come up in trade rumors in terms of Milwaukee looking to improve their standing within the East. It's even going to be a buck after the trade deadline. So I think that's something else to consider. I think he would probably be the drop out of all these guys, which is crazy when you think about his resume to say that of all these players, he's the one that I would most likely drop.
Yeah, I think if like even preseason, but like last season of the time, Gershon Yabusele wasn't even in the NBA.
Yeah,
that was like pretty low. So it's like, would you rather have Chris Middleton or Gershon Yabusele? It's like, wait, what do you mean?
Yeah,
but I've seen some reports or rumors, whatever you want to call them, this morning that like the Bucks are focused on trading Middleton and draft capital for Kyle Kuzma, which one I don't get, but two, don't look away. You're having to make me laugh. But, Middleton in Washington, I can't imagine is going to play much. Like that feels like a recipe for, yes, we're going to trade for you. You're going to sit right there and you're not going to touch the basketball for us because we need to get better lottery odds and you don't need to hurt your knees any worse.
Yeah.
Ankles. I think it's the ankles right now.
It's the ankles, yeah.
The bilateral ankle surgery this offseason.
As a Knicks fan, I would welcome that trade wholeheartedly. Go ahead and do it.
They need it. It's the missing piece, guys. You guys go for it.
Yeah, maybe to be fair, maybe Kuzma would be a bit different with a team that's truly contending and has some powerful personalities to kind of check some of the behaviors, so to speak. But I'm confused as to how that would help them in their aim to contend for a championship.
I mean, he'd be the 3. Like he wouldn't be playing the 4, which is kind of what I feel like he has in his career because they're going to start Giannis and Brook Lopez. So I don't see that lineup working particularly well. I think that if there was a team that he could be like a floor spacing for like that could actually be a pretty decent fit. I don't really see how the Bucks are a great fit for him.
Oh, this is a fun question. How do we evaluate Josh Hart in redraft formats? 12-team 9-cat head-to-head. Is he worth investing a first-round pick in next year, or when would you take him? Look, I love Josh Hart as much as anyone, and he's been outstanding this year. You can't use a first-round pick on him in 12-team 9-cat. You just can't do it. I know I think he's like just outside the top 25 at this point in the season.
He's Basketball Monster has him 16th.
16th. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's even better than I thought he was. But yeah, I can't. I think he's still like a third or fourth round pick, and even that may be a bit high because this has been like, I don't know, the stars have aligned, so to speak, for Josh Hart, and I don't know if we can expect that again next year. Certainly have value. I think he's going to be more of like a middle round guy. If you want to roll the dice, late third, early fourth, okay, but I can't see a first round pick for him.
Yeah, I think the first round pick would be ambitious. So it would be kind of taking away the upside from, like, if you would have gotten him that, like, obviously like the 9-cat numbers kind of back it up a little bit. I think it's a couple of very strong categories that he has that amplifies it a little bit. But let's say you took him in like the 30s or 40s this year, like it would feel like, okay, he's playing a little bit above what we expected him to. So I think, middle rounds probably makes the most sense. And I think it definitely makes sense, like a punt points build in a 9-cat league. Like that'll maximize his value. So that's probably the strategy. But I think fourth round is probably the earliest that I would take him, unless you're just like really leaning into your build and have zero interest in caring about ADPs. Like you could definitely make that work. So
yeah, based on his ADP, he's probably one of the MVPs in fantasy basketball this year. So, but yeah, I can't go first round for him. Right. Jeff asks, are Chris Paul and Daniel Gafford holds? I think Gafford for sure. Lively out and Davis's stated desire to play the 4. I think, was it Nico who called him a center during the press conference, or was it Jason Kidd?
No way. I didn't.
One of them referred to him as a center. It's like, that man does not want to play center. At least maybe in like crunch time he'll do it, but I don't think he wants to be the only big on the floor. Yeah, no, I swear to you.
It's like half the reason he got traded.
He wanted to be next to another big, and well, now you have that. So I think Gafford is certainly a hold while we wait to see, what happens with Lively, when he returns. But Gafford's a hold for sure. I think Chris Paul, you kind of have to wait this out for a little bit, see what they do there. I'm not sure how a lineup with him and De'Aaron Fox starting alongside each other would work defensively. But I wouldn't put it past them to try it out for a little bit, just because a guy of Chris Paul's pedigree, you can't just pull him out of the rotation entirely or just drop him to the bench, I think.
Yeah, I mean, even when Chris Paul was coming off the bench in Golden State, I think he was still like a top, I don't remember the exact number, but like a guy who's good roster.
Just outside top 100 or just in, he's right around there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know, this is probably just more speculation. Like I have no idea if it is something they would try, but recently with Sacramento, like obviously Malik Monk and Sabonis have both been getting a ton of assists, have seen more playmaking opportunities, and it's not like De'Aaron Fox is a point guard like had they just traded for like a guy like a Trae Young or like a Luka Doncic, like guys that have the ball in their hands the whole game. Like Fox isn't necessarily that type of point guard, so they could try it with Fox and Chris Paul starting and just see how that works. I don't know if it's something they would stick with, but Chris Paul, I imagine, still plays enough to be worth holding, but we'll see.
Okay. Neesmith, Whitmore, Day'Ron Sharpe, Dorian Finney-Smith, rest of the season worth adding?
I think it's hard to say entirely for rest of season, like especially like a guy like Whitmore, like he might have some value short term with Fred VanVleet out, and Jabari Smith still out, but it's not necessarily like the whole season kind of thing. Neesmith, I think was like a standard league guy last year. He's obviously missed a ton of time this year, so it hasn't happened, but still could be worth an add. DFS, I would say no, and Day'Ron Sharpe, maybe after the deadline, we'll see what that roster looks like.
Yeah. I think if anyone were to be worth adding for the rest of the season, I'd probably say Neesmith, just because of what he brings to the table defensively. And Ben Mathurin really isn't much of a defender. So Mathurin's played well offensively, but I kind of wonder if there will come a point where they go back to Neesmith as a starter just because of his ability to defend, scoring wings that they're gonna need, especially think about Boston going up against them. Cleveland, not so much. New York, potentially, if you have a healthy OG Anunoby out there, that may, and a Mikal Bridges, that may be something to watch. But I think Neesmith's going to be the one of these four that you mentioned that would be worth adding for the rest of the season. This one should be fun. If you had to predict one more blockbuster trade this season, what do you think is most likely?
I think the easy answer as far as like most likely is Jimmy Butler. But I want to try and think of something more fun. Like Jimmy Butler and Bradley Beal feel like pretty easy players to like. If a trade works, then like they're probably going to do it. Maybe, the Warriors Kevin Durant rumors, I think that would be a lot of fun and not too much of like a lock to happen. That maybe I can say that one would be a possibility.
Yeah. This question kind of makes me feel uneasy. I can see it getting clipped. That he said they're going to – no.
No. Thank you for backing me up. Like, no.
Yeah. But I think my fun will be Jimmy Butler doesn't get traded. That's what I'm going to say. And Miami's going to have to figure something out. They'll probably just tell him, like, well, we're going to pay you your salary. Just stay away from the team. Go to San Diego State game like you did the other night. Enjoy some college basketball, enjoy some NBA games, but we can't have you in the building anymore. I think that would be my prediction for the trade deadline because it just feels a little bit too cumbersome to make a deal, especially when Bradley Beal has a no-trade clause and Miami doesn't want him, for financial reasons, and he wants to be somewhere warm, and it feels like those warm weather teams don't really have a need for him at this point. So that would be my prediction. Jimmy Butler does not get traded.
I'll throw out one more fun one.
Right.
Zion Williamson gets traded. I think that I saw his name in one or two rumor tweets. Of course, it's probably, I think it was like the Warriors that have, again, been calling basically the team. But the relationship with the team has been called into question a number of times. I'm not going to like speculate that it's like, they definitely have a poor relationship, but like it's definitely been a question mark over the past couple of years. And then he had those comments like within the last week or so, I think maybe just the last few days, where back-to-backs.
Yeah.
And he was like, I could, but I play for the Pelicans. I work for the Pelicans. And like it's what they decide. And it was almost like that was kind of like petty. But exactly. I don't want to say anything to disrespect the boss, but I could easily see him, in a lost season for the Pelicans, like them making a trade, trading away Zion, trading away Brandon Ingram, because like Trey Murphy's been so freaking good that if they just decide to run this whole roster back and take him off the bench, it would be like so stupid. So they kind of have to trade Zion or Brandon Ingram or both at this point.
That would be a fireable offense.
Yes.
Like, Trey Murphy.
Don't do it, Willie Green. Do not do it, Willie Green. Trey Murphy.
See, I don't think Willie would do it. It's one of those things where conversations above him would probably be like, look, you need to start this guy. And it's like, go out on your sword, Willie. Say no. Yosef, thanks for joining in. Should I stash Jabari Smith or Herb Jones? 12-team 9-cat head-to-head. I feel better about Jabari in this scenario than I do Herb, even though I kind of wonder if they're going to bring Jabari off the bench because of how well Amen Thompson has played and how well he fits with that lineup. So,
yeah, if you have the open IL spot, then I would say stash Jabari, but Herb Jones, like assuming I seriously doubt they would trade him. But even when he comes back, like how much is he going to play down the stretch in a lost season? So Jabari Smith should play more, but does he start or I don't know. Like I kind of would want them to start him and bring Dylan Brooks off the bench but that's just me being a selfish fantasy manager that sees more upside from the other guys. It may not even make more sense for their team. It's up to Ayo Dosunmu, of course, but I think Jabari Smith playing 20 to 25 minutes per game, it's worth at least trying because maybe he does start. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Dylan will stay in the starting lineup just because of what he brings defensively. Yeah. Although it didn't exactly work out last night. It was just funny that Ime Udoka said after the game, even our supposed defenders were getting cooked. It's like, yeah, that's going to be one of the quotes of the season. That's one of the quotes of the season right there. He had 46 points in the fourth, but yeah. I think Jabari for sure is the one I would hold here. Because like Noah said, we don't know how much Herb's going to play once he's healthy enough to play. So, or if he will be back, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Spencer Dinwiddie, rest of the season, 9 cat, 10 teams, 16-man roster.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't think in a 10-team league that he'll have much value. I mean, I guess he could play 20 minutes per game off the bench. Now that Luka's gone, Quentin Grimes is gone. We'll see if they're done making moves. But aside from when Kyrie is out, because if he's out, then Dinwiddie will be worth streaming. But I don't think he's like a must-hold kind of player.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Okay. Quick fire for the last two. Pick up Jalen Smith or Montes Buzelis, 9 cat.
I'd rather pick up Buzelis.
Yeah.
More upside there.
What do you guys think of my stashes? Please rank them. Jalen Smith, Scoot Henderson, Tumani Kamara, Jovic, Zach Collins, and Isaiah Collier. Give me Kamara number 1. I'd say Kamara 1, Scoot 2, Jovic 3, Collier 4, Smith 5, and Collins 6.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that list. I might flip Zach Collins and Jalen Smith, but I think they're both the bottom 2.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd go Scoot 1 over Kamara just because Kamara's already been really good. But I think Scoot has more upside to be even better. But
I can see that.
I think the Portland guys are top 2.
Yeah, you get to a point where Anthony Simons just sits out, then you'd probably vault Scoot ahead of Tumani. I can see that.
It's insane that it just hasn't happened yet. I think that there should be deals made by Portland at the deadline because they have too many super talented young guys just playing 15 minutes per game.
Yeah.
Shouldn't happen.
All right. Last one before we go. Is Jackson Hayes worth a grab, or do you think the Lakers get it big?
They're going to make a trade. I don't know who it is, but it would be – I mean, if you have an open roster spot and an extra move to make, sure. Maybe that wants to trade with them now that they just got Luka for what they gave up, and everybody's mad. But I would be surprised if they didn't get a center.
Yeah. I think Hayes will probably have value for the rest of this week. Because I don't think you can't go the long haul with him as your starting center. Obviously, you can do it, but I don't think you probably should do it if you want to contend this year. So, I'd expect him to make a trade as well. All right. We have been here long enough. Once again, thank you all for tuning in and asking questions. For this week, the podcast will be recorded on Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, right after the trade deadline. Be ourselves, Dan Titus, Yahoo will be there, and we'll have Kurt Halen and Pro Basketball talk in as well. Talk about the trades, break everything down from a fantasy standpoint. And until then, thank you all for tuning in and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.